Imagine for a second that you are the landlord of a house. You have a tenant who wants to rent your basement, but this isn't just any tenant. This is a tenant who has a history of listening in on conversations. Now imagine that running through the walls of that basement are the main electrical wires and internet cables for your entire neighborhood. The cables that carry your bank details, your private messages, and your country's secrets. You would probably say no, right? You would say it is too risky. But right now, in London, one of the most controversial real estate deals in history is about to reach its final climax. We are talking about a fortress, a super embassy, a diplomatic compound so massive that it would be the largest in Europe. But the problem is not the size. The problem is what lies beneath. New leaked documents have just revealed the existence of a secret room, a hidden chamber deep underground in the proposed plans. And this room isn't just for storage. It is located mere inches away from critical fiber-optic cables that carry the financial data of the entire Western world. The deadline for the final decision is January 20th, 2026, just a few days from now. The United States is watching, the Five Eyes Alliance is on high alert, and the question everyone is asking is London about to unknowingly sign away its digital sovereignty? Welcome to a deep dive. Today, we decode the mystery of the Royal Mint Court. To understand the gravity of this situation, we first need to understand the geography. In real estate, they say location, location, location. But in geopolitics, location is about leverage. China currently has an embassy in London at Portland Place. It is a standard building, but for the last few years, Beijing has been ambitious. They purchased a site called the Royal Mint Court for about £255 million back in 2018. Now pause and think about this location. This is historic. This site is directly opposite the Tower of London, one of the most secure and iconic landmarks in British history. But more importantly, it sits right on the edge of the City of London, the financial heart of the UK, and just west of Canary Wharf. Why does this matter to an American audience? Because London is the second largest financial center in the world after New York. Trillions of dollars in transactions flow through this specific square mile every single day. The data cables that facilitate these trades, the internet backbones that connect Europe to the Atlantic, they physically run through the ground in this area. China's plan is to turn this historic site into a 700,000 square foot mega complex. To give you a sense of scale, this would be almost twice the size of the Chinese embassy in Washington, D.C. It is not just an office, it's a campus. It would house hundreds of staff, cultural exchanges, and diplomatic residences. But here's where the story gets dark. Since 2022, local councils have tried to block this. They rejected it, but China didn't give up. They pushed harder, and now the decision has been taken out of the hands of local mayors and placed directly on the desk of the UK central government, specifically the desk of Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner. The clock is ticking towards January 20th, 2026. So, why is the US intelligence community so worried? It brings us to the secret room. Up until this week, the architectural plans for this embassy were heavily redacted. If you went to the planning website, big chunks of the basement levels were blacked out. The official reason given by the Chinese architects was security, and that's fair. Embassies need security, but investigative journalists and recent leaks have peeled back those redactions, and what they found has sent a chill down the spine of security experts. The unredacted plans reveal a massive network of underground facilities, 208 rooms in total below street level. But there's one specific area that is causing the alarm. There's a planned chamber that involves demolishing and reconstructing the outer basement wall. This wall is immediately adjacent to a network of commercial tunnels. These aren't just empty tunnels. These tunnels house high-capacity fiber-optic cables. These are the arteries of the internet. Now, I want to explain the technology here because a lot of people think, so what? The cables are underground, the embassy is underground, what's the big deal? Here's the physics of fiber optics. To steal data from a copper wire, you need to physically splice it. But with fiber optics, the technology for espionage has advanced. You don't necessarily need to cut the cable and interrupt the service, which would alert the company. If you can get physical access to the cable, you can use a technique called bending. By slightly bending the fiber optic glass, a tiny amount of light leaks out. That light is the data. If you have the right equipment that fits easily into a secret room, you can capture that leaked light, decode it, and you have a copy of the traffic. All of this happens without the user ever knowing their connection has been tapped. This is the tap threat. The concern is that once this embassy is built, that basement becomes sovereign soil. Under the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations, British police cannot enter that building. MI5 cannot install bugs in that building. If China decides to break through that basement wall and access the cables running inches away, the UK authorities would legally have no way to check, no way to inspect, and no way to stop it. This brings us to the American perspective. Why is Washington involved? The UK and the US are part of the Five Eyes Alliance, along with Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. This is the tightest intelligence sharing group in the world. We share everything: NSA data, CIA assessments, MI6 human intelligence. If London's infrastructure is compromised, the Five Eyes network is compromised. Reports have surfaced that the US government has privately warned the UK against approving this project. The logic is simple. If you allow a strategic rival to build a listening post on top of your central nervous system, we cannot trust your network. Think about the Huawei 5G debate from a few years ago. The US told the UK, if you put Huawei tech in your cell towers, we stop sharing intel. The UK eventually banned Huawei. This is Huawei 2.0, but in real estate form. If this embassy is built, it could become a hub for signal intelligence across Europe. It's not just about the cables under the ground, it's about the antennas on the roof. A 700,000 square foot complex can hide a lot of receivers. We've seen this movie before. Remember the mysterious microwave attacks or the concerns about the Chinese listening station in Cuba targeting Florida? The proximity reduces the signal loss. Being right next to the city of London means you're right next to the targets. The FBI and MI5 have already issued unprecedented joint warnings about Chinese economic espionage. In 2024 and 2025, we saw a surge in cases where researchers and parliamentary aides in the UK were arrested for spying. The atmosphere is thick with distrust. So, if the risk is so obvious, why hasn't the UK government just said no? This is where the story shifts from technology to brutal politics. China knows the UK is in a fragile economic position. Post-Brexit, the UK needs trade deals. They need investment. Beijing has made it very clear, if you block this embassy, there will be consequences. We've seen reports, some confirmed, some leaked, that China has threatened to freeze trade talks or pull investment from other UK infrastructure projects if this permit is denied. It's a classic leverage play. The decision now rests with the Labour government. They're stuck between a rock and a hard place. If they say yes to the embassy, they please Beijing and secure trade, but they enrage the US, risk their intelligence status, and potentially hand over the keys to their digital kingdom. They also face a massive backlash from human rights groups. If they say no to the embassy, they protect national security, but they trigger a diplomatic freeze with China. Beijing could retaliate by closing British consulates in China or hitting British exports with tariffs. The deadline is January 20th, 2026. The fact that the decision has been delayed this long shows how terrified the British government is of making the wrong move. But the discovery of the secret room in the unredacted documents changes the calculus. It's no longer just a building, it's a smoking gun. It provides the UK government with a legitimate national security excuse to say no, without making it look purely political. They can point to the cables and say, sorry, the risk to infrastructure is too high. Let's go deeper into the concept of sovereign soil. This is something that often confuses people. When a country buys land for an embassy, the land still belongs to the host country, but the premises become inviolable. This means the host country forfeits its jurisdiction inside the walls. If a crime happens inside, the London police cannot enter without the ambassador's permission. We saw this with Julian Assange in the Ecuadorian embassy, and we saw the darker side of it in the Jamal Khashoggi case in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. Now apply this to the secret room. If the UK approves this, and 2 years from now British Telecom or Vodafone detects strange latency on their cables near the Tower of London, they can dig up the street. But if the interference is coming from inside the embassy basement wall, they are powerless. They cannot raid the embassy. They cannot send inspectors. They would have to sever diplomatic ties to enter. That's why the secret room is so dangerous. It creates a permanent blind spot in the middle of London's security grid. And let's look at the timing. We are in 2026. The world is fracturing into digital blocks. You have the Western internet and the Chinese internet. The battle for AI dominance, quantum computing, and financial data is at its peak. In this context, building a fortress on top of your rival's data pipes is not just bold, it's a strategic masterstroke by Beijing. If they pull it off, they win a permanent listening post in the West. If they fail, they have exposed the weakness of the UK's decision-making process. So, what are we looking at for January 20th? The local council already said no. The clear recommendation from security experts is no, but the pressure from the diplomats who want smooth relations is to say yes. However, the leak of the secret room plans feels strategic. In the world of intelligence, leaks rarely happen by accident. The fact that these unredacted documents found their way to the press just days before the decision suggests that someone inside the UK establishment is screaming, "Don't do this." If the UK approves this, watch for a sharp reaction from Washington. You might see the US shifting sensitive financial operations away from London. You might see a cooling of the Five Eyes relationship. If the UK rejects it, watch for Beijing's retaliation. It will be swift and it will be economic. But there is a third option. The UK could approve the embassy, but with strict conditions. No basement access, mandatory inspections, thick concrete buffers. But can you enforce that on a superpower? History suggests you can't. This story is about more than just bricks and mortar. It is about the invisible war of the 21st century. We used to worry about armies crossing borders. Now we worry about signals crossing cables. The Royal Mint Court was once where Britain made its money. It is ironic that it might become the place where Britain loses control of its data. The secret room is a metaphor for the hidden risks of global integration. We invited the world to our doorstep, but we forgot to lock the basement. We will be tracking the decision on January 20th closely. If the approval goes through, the landscape of London changes forever. If it is blocked, the diplomatic war begins. I want to know what you think. Should a nation be allowed to build a super embassy on top of critical infrastructure? Is the trade money worth the security risk, or is this just paranoia? Let me know in the comments. I will see you in the next deep dive.